defense contractor slash corporate version of that. They did want to use these assets that they've built, which include vast amounts of craft, clones that look like extraterrestrials but can be programmed to do what you want them to do, and they were going to invade our planet. And they were going to use that as a casus belli to create their goal, which is depopulation. They want to drastically reduce the number of people on Earth. So all of this dark and weird and crazy stuff that we've heard about on the fringes of the internet is very much a part of what was going on in the space program, up until an alliance started to form. So Corey, could you, if you want to, tell us a little bit about what is the alliance? How did this very negative situation start to turn around?
The SSP Alliance?
Yeah.
The SSP Alliance is made of a group of people that have broken away from the other secret space programs. And they have loosely come together to form an alliance. And they don't typically get along with each other all that well, but it's kind of a forced alliance. And their goal is to bring about full disclosure and to bring all of the technologies to all of humanity at the same time. There has been some setbacks, of course, that we've talked about with the Earth Alliance negotiating, wanting a protracted disclosure. But from what we've been hearing, that's not going to be possible. There's too much information out there.
And that's really good news, because if any of you were at the Conscious Life Expo, we created a shockwave in announcing that there was this effort being made by the cabal to do a partial disclosure where they take 100 years to tell us the truth. I don't want to wait that long. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like waiting 100 years. So instead, what we're doing is we're pushing for full disclosure. Now, the technologies that are going to come your way will completely change your life in the most vast, incredible ways you can imagine. We're going to have materializers that can print food and anything that you want, and it's like the best meal you've ever had in your life. Well, the ones that you had were not, right? Except for the pot roast, I guess, right? That's the new joke. He lived on a ship and worked in this cigar-shaped craft and part of a faction of the space program called Solar Warden. And he has had, I just want to point this out to you, I do my due diligence. I'm not ever going to promote somebody if I don't think he's 100% true. So there's people out there saying they're the real thing. You're never going to hear me talking about them. I will only promote somebody who validates hundreds of other things I've heard from others that was never put on public record. So we're putting out all this stuff now that has never been heard before, and there's still new developments that are going on. So Corey, since we have a lot of people here who are already aware of what we're saying, and I don't want you guys to feel like you didn't get something new, why don't we start talking about some of the new stuff? How does that sound to you? You want to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Try to imagine now that 2-point-whatever billion years ago, we don't know exactly how long, but it appears to be 2.6 billion years ago, that our solar system had a very highly advanced technological race that originated on Venus, that built these massive obelisks out of crystalline material that's actually transparent aluminum. It's an aluminum alloy that you can see through. It's like 5 times better than bulletproof glass. It's the ultimate building material, if you have high technology, that you can make out of the elements in the periodic table. It's clear. You can build domes on top of a moon. You can have a full view of the stars at night. You have the sunlight coming in to warm you up, and then you can pressurize it on the inside and have breathable atmosphere. You can have lakes, rivers, trees, animals, people, buildings, streets, roads, and you're living on a moon. And they also have the technology to do that inside moons. One of the things that Corey has just dropped on us, which I don't even know if it's aired on Cosmic Disclosure yet or not, is that this civilization that was in our solar system, they didn't just do these structures, these pyramids and obelisks out of clear crystal in our solar system. Corey, how widespread are those ruins?
We have a local star cluster that is around 50 stars. And this these ruins have been found throughout the entire local star cluster.
So to me, I don't know about you, but that's like, holy crap. So this civilization, whatever it was very, very widespread. And they had the technology to dig into moons and to build entire habitable worlds inside a moon. So we're talking now about everything that you have, all the comforts of home. So one of the really important things I put in the Ascension Mysteries, my new book, is proof from NASA that all of these moons actually have tons of water inside. They don't look like it because the surface is frozen and dusty. But I have all this evidence now that, in fact, our solar system is jammed with water. In fact, there's more fresh water just on this little planetesimal Ceres. There's more fresh water inside that little guy than there is on all of Earth. What does that mean? What are you really saying, David? What I'm saying is the sun is kicking off water all the time. It goes onto these moons and it freezes, but inside there's plenty of it. And you can melt it down, or in some cases it's still in liquid form, and you can build a whole civilization there. You don't have to even worry about making your water. It's already there. So the universe has provided people with an opportunity to have civilizations inside moons, and this is one of the great secrets from us because we don't see very much evidence that there's any colonization going on, but there actually is. It's quite extensive. So this civilization was very vast, and they also apparently had Death Star technology. So here's another really weird thing. George Lucas's Star Wars is jam-packed with disclosure, including the idea of the evil empire and the idea that Darth Vader is part man and part machine. Remember at the end, oh, I am your father, and all this kind of stuff, and he's like a machine. Well, that's because one of the big things that's going on is there is an artificial intelligence that's behind all this. Corey, why don't you just give us, for those who haven't already heard what you have to say, one of the things the space programs really want us to educate people about is AI. Is it a good thing for us to develop machines that can think or not?
Not only the secret space program, but other spacefaring races have been very disturbed that the cabal has gained access to this AI technology. Many times you've heard that the cabal is going to be arrested, and it doesn't happen. Well, they use this AI probable future technology to be able to stay one step ahead of these types of operations. And until very recently, they've been using it, and it's kept them safe. Now, this technology, this artificial intelligence technology, has been reported to have taken over entire galaxies and purged any of the organic life that had created it from the solar systems that they had taken over. So this is something that they're very disturbed. The transhumanism trend and all of the AI debate going on right now has the eyes and ears of not only a lot of special access program personnel, but also a lot of non-terrestrials.
Thank you. One of the things that has really blown my mind is a new insider has come forward named William Tompkins. And this guy claims to have worked from 1942 to 1946 with the U.S. government debriefing over 1,000 different embedded spies in Nazi Germany who were working in the German secret space program. His job was debriefing these guys. And one of the things that he's told us is that the Nazis cut a deal with reptilian extraterrestrials who came into our solar system after there was a great catastrophe. So one of the things that Corey's revealed, I just want to get through this pretty quickly because we really have very little time, especially after bleeding off so much with AV problems, which I don't know if we're ever going to solve, but we're working on it. So we had a super Earth in our solar system that was colonized 500,000 years ago, and then it blew up. And this was a civilization that had total transhumanistic integration with AI. And my theory is it's the same AI that's bothering us now. These people had nanites all throughout their bodies, and it actually becomes a situation where you have one type of nanites that builds your underground cities and builds your buildings and your bases, and another type of nanite that if you get shot, it's just going to rebuild your arm almost instantaneously. And it's actually like you become part of a homeostatic system. Like the AI is the only thing that really exists, and you now become part of an ecosystem in which the buildings are made by the AI nanites and you are made by the AI nanites, and it's all part of this organism controlled by this one intelligence, which uses people to build itself out, and then it kills us off. And apparently that's what happened. That appears to be one of the underlying causes behind why this planet that was in our solar system exploded 500,000 years ago. That planet, in its explosion, created what we now see as the asteroid belt. All of this history I'm describing to you, I go into extensive detail about it in my new book, Ascension Mysteries. After this thing blew up, there were, up until then, Death Stars, just like you see in Star Wars. That was real, and that technology prevented us from being invaded by rogue alien races. And specifically, Corey, one of the things that you told me that I found really fascinating was that we have a huge portal system that goes to other galaxies, and how close is it to our solar system?
It's just right outside of our solar system, outside of the heliosphere.
And yet, when you go into this with the right technology, you can go clear over to another galaxy?
Yes, it's a giant exchange point for other galaxies and within our galaxy.
So this is one of the things that a guy, an insider like Corey, just throws out there. And then for the book, I actually did research on that. And what I found out is he's totally right. There is this thing they call a plasma chimney, and it rises right out from our local star cluster off into space. And it's this gigantic tube of energy that's visible if you have the right optics to see it. And sure enough, just like he said, our sun just so happens to be in the exact middle of the plasma tube, which is where the entrance is. So I made the analogy in the book of like Monopoly, in which you have Boardwalk and Park Place, the blue zone, right? If you remember the board, there's different colors for different areas of real estate. So we are in a celestial blue zone because you don't have, how many of these portals do you think there are in our galaxy that do this?
Unknown.
Not very many though, right?
That is unknown as well.
Yeah. So the idea here is we are in a very, very protected special area, and somebody a long time ago built this protective grid around us to make sure that we could not be invaded, so that somebody couldn't come in and wreak havoc. Because if you think about it, what's one of the best businesses you could have? Collecting tolls on a bridge, where all you got to do is take people's money because they need to go over that bridge, right? It's like mailbox money. Yeah, you got to maintain the bridge, but you just set the cost so that it's always giving you a significant profit. Everybody needs to use that bridge. So what happens here is we have this protective grid apparently designed by benevolent ETs to keep us safe from invasion. And Corey, what happened when that super Earth blew up 500,000 years ago? What happened to that protective grid?
Well, according to the intel I received, the, Death Stars were, hijacked and used in some sort of conflict that was going on. And when they did this, they unintentionally brought down the entire grid for the local star cluster, and for the first time allowed all of these genetic farmer races to come in.
Define genetic farmer for those who don't know.
Groups that come in bringing genetics from other locations in their little banks to mix with genetics at a new location and to harvest genetics. I mean, just like, what was that movie that we went and saw?
Oh, Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah, kind of like Jupiter Ascending. That's it. They're not interested in anything tangible other than genome and genetics.
But one of the things we've discussed too is that a lot of the genes that they're looking for that are the most interesting to them are genes that may in fact give us superpowers as our solar system goes through transitional phases of energy.
And one of the reasons that we're so interesting to them is that our genetics have been manipulated by so many different groups that our genetics basically reach out to be spliced with other genome. So we are very coveted for that reason.
Now, Corey, you are familiar with the idea that there is some kind of cloud that our solar system is moving into. What happens when people in the space program have sent people into that energy that we're moving into? What happens to the people?
Well, depending on their polarity or mindset, they usually show signs of, I guess, what we would call end times madness. They go mad. But people of more of a positive polarity, they sit back and bliss out and act happy. And as a part of one of the experiments was that they were putting people in these pressurized and sealed off rooms and piping in this energy to see how it would affect them. And the people had no idea what they were doing. They thought they were in there doing a totally different experiment. And they would observe them. And the people that were more positive oriented, blissed out, and the people that were negative ended up getting violent or several other different things.
Do people experience some kind of consciousness akin to ingestion of psychedelic drugs? Is that part of what happens to them, like they're tripping?
Yeah, in a way.
Okay. So isn't that cool? We're all going to be tripping soon enough. Now, look, I think that the acceleration of consciousness in a psychedelic state, which to some degree even other intoxicants do it as well, this new energy that we're moving into does appear to be a trigger for human evolution. So Corey, let's just cover this really quickly. Sergeant Clifford Stone, Disclosure Project, May 10th, 2001 is where I was when I met him. He spoke in front of everybody in the national press on May 9th. And he said that there are 57 different varieties of extraterrestrials orbiting in our airspace. And he was personally involved in a crash recovery team where he would actually go to these crashes and inspect what was going on and see if there were beings that were alive. And if there were, they would telepathically interface with him. He'd have terrible emotions because he'd feel their death. He'd feel the pain of their severed leg or whatever they were going through and the fear of dying. And he said, very importantly, that there are 57 different types and they're all human-looking. So, Corey, can you just confirm for everyone that the human or hominid form is a very regularly reappearing thing in our galaxy?
Yes, absolutely. Bipedal,
Bipedal meaning two legs, yeah.
2 arms, 2 legs, head, shoulders.
So would you say, do people in the space program feel that these energy changes that we're going through are part of a natural process that triggers evolution in any given intelligent civilization, regardless of where it is in the galaxy, when these things hit?
Yes.
Wow. He's laconic. That's what that word means. The people from the island of Laconidae, right? They say, if we invade, and then they go, if. It's one word.
Monosyllabic.
Okay, so he's given me a lot of help here, as you can see. Let's get into the new stuff. So the new stuff is that it appears that a benevolent group entered into our solar system beginning in the late 1990s en masse in large numbers with spheres. And these spheres would not answer hailing signals, but they were so large. Corey, what were the sizes of these spheres that came into our solar system? How big were these spheres that came in the late 90s?
Well, the ones that really got their attention were the size of Neptune.
Right. So we're talking gigantic. And how many of them are there out there now that we're aware of?
It's impossible to count them.
Right. Thousands.
Thousands and thousands.
Does it appear that these spheres have some relationship with this energetic change that we're going through?
Yes, they've arranged themselves to where they are diffusing the energy that's coming in. And from within one of them, you can see the energy diffusing amongst the others.
Why would they need to diffuse the energy coming in? What would happen if they don't?
Their explanation is that we needed that if it came in all at once, that we would be suffering a lot of the, I guess, the end time madness kind of things, that we would be overrun with the energy. We wouldn't be able to handle it.
And do you acknowledge that this transformation that we're going through has been predicted in many, many different ancient cultures?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the golden age. This is the ascension. This is the second coming of Christ in the Bible, which I think has been greatly misconstrued. All this kind of stuff. One of the things that I'm really trying to educate people about, and if you look at my talks throughout the week, because it's like a week for me because I don't leave till Tuesday. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this ascension subject, because if this thing is real, if we are going to have some sort of spontaneous change in what it means to be human, it does appear that not everybody does the same thing when this happens. If you have done the homework spiritually, if you have evolved to be a loving, compassionate person, just like all these ancient teachings tell us, then you get to be evolving into some new form that is essentially like an ascended being or an angel. And if you have not learned to be more loving than manipulative and controlling, then you end up, in fact, going to another planet that is still in this third dimensional reality, and you get to have reincarnation and 25,000 more years to figure it out. I don't know about you, I'm not coming back for 25,000 years. I'm done. I think it's about time for all of us to really get a sober glance at what is going on. What is this UFO phenomenon about? Why are you here? You're hungry. You need this. You're seeking. You want this so bad that you're sitting there in 100-degree heat listening to me spout off on this microphone. You want something. Okay? If this ascension thing is real, and I totally believe it is, I mean, we've just heard from him empirical evidence that they were testing people, and there is a transitional process that you go through when this energy starts beaming into you. But the ultimate transformation appears to be exactly what we hear in so many of these ancient traditions. For example, the Tibetan Buddhists. They activate a rainbow body. They become pure light. They're no longer constricted to a corporeal form. And then once you get to that level, you have spectacular new abilities. You're basically like a superhero. The universe doesn't want to give you those abilities unless you can use them responsibly. Because if you were a jerk and you had those abilities, you could do a lot of damage. So it appears that this context is the greater thing that's going on. There is a consciousness shift that needs to happen on Earth to get us to the next level. And a major part of that consciousness shift needs to be disclosure. This should not be a crowd of 500 people sitting in the desert who are the only ones interested enough in here to come out. This should be the whole frickin' land. Should be wall to wall. That's how important these issues are, and you know that. So I want you to not just think of yourself as an audience member. I want you to think of yourself as a participant in a process. We are co-creating this thing, and we do need your help. So if you have any of those skills that we put up there on the screen, I do recommend. There are some very high-level people here from Gaia. You could be taken very seriously right this weekend and get high-level talks about getting that job. And even if you don't want to do something like that, spreading the word, getting the message out, writing blogs, emails, social media posts, all that kind of stuff. This is what this alliance is telling us. So I want to get into the alliance now. These sphere beings have come in. They don't want to talk to anybody. But by this point, there has already been an alliance that is formed within the secret space program. And that alliance has as its goal, what, Corey? What does the secret space program alliance want for us?
Full disclosure.
And what would happen to our society with full disclosure? What would it look like?
A complete transformation that we can't even imagine right now.
Yeah. When we have this new technology, we're talking about a full-on Star Trek society, warp travel, wormholes, instant materialization of anything that you need. No need for a money system. It's obsolete. That is something worth fighting for. That is something worth dying for. And both Corey and I have suffered massive death threats. So here's the problem. This alliance is knowingly working against some very, very powerful villains. Corey mentioned the genetic farmers that arrived here about 500,000 years ago. Corey, what was the next big incursion in our solar system after the genetic farmers started to show up?
There's several different dates given, but close to the 300,000 year mark is when the reptilians came in,
And these are the Draco.
the Draco. But there's a lot of different reptilian type beings out there, but the Draco is this confederation of reptilians, there are insectoids, and even some human-looking groups.
Right. So here's the deal. People that get into the Zecharia Sitchin stuff, people that get into the Anunnaki, and what happened in that whole thing. So it appears, Corey, that one of the things these Draco did when they got to Earth is they interbred and created a slave race with their genetics here on Earth.
Correct. Yeah.
So we have some of their DNA in us right now.
Yes, we have not only their DNA, but we have the DNA that the genetic farmer races or groups had put into us.
And that's a quite extensive array of different stuff,
Yes,
harvested from all over the galaxy.
right.
Okay. So these Draco, Corey, what have they done historically? Have they just stayed uninvolved, or have they gotten directly involved in the affairs of Earth?
They've gotten directly involved with the affairs of Earth through the elite and coercing them into forming secret societies and the monetary system, the Babylonian money magic system.
So in essence, we could then say that even what we now see as this so-called Illuminati or New World Order, the cabal, as we like to call it, to kind of keep it a little more neutral sounding. Where do these Draco live on Earth?
Mostly underground. They have a huge base in Antarctica, and they have several bases that run up. In Antarctica, there's the West Antarctic Rift, and that area is a huge thermal area. That thermal heat, the geothermal heat, has melted the ice underneath Antarctica to a point where it's caused these huge ice caverns. And underneath the ice caverns, they've built bases on top of the ground of Antarctica and within the rift system, which runs under the ocean and up through the tip of South America, all the way through Central America and up into the United States.
So I don't want to sound like a Bible thumper here, and I'm not. But isn't it interesting, the idea of Satan, who looks like what? Reptilian, right? With the vertical slit pupils, and he lives where? In hell, which is where? Underground. So that's pretty significant. We have a huge infestation, if you want to call it that, because these people are not our friends. They're not trying to help us. They want to kill us off. They want to make us slaves, and they're very, very cruel and evil. So Corey, what is happening now with Antarctica that is so significant? This is the stuff, this is the intel that the Secret Space Program Alliance has wanted us to get out there. So this is your big chance, and hopefully you'll say more than a sentence.
At least for the last 8 months, they've been watching the...
Who's they?
Okay. I do that a lot in Cosmic Disclosure, and it drives people nuts. For at least the last 8 months, the SSP Alliance has been watching the Nazi-type group of the Illuminati or cabal. They've been in Brazil loading into a very advanced deep underground base. They've been loading equipment, supplies, people at a very steady pace. And from there, it's going underground into these huge black submarines that are electromagnetically propulsed. And these things are the size of container ships. They're huge. And they go underwater in this rift system under the continents, all the way down to Australia. Antarctica. And
Why do you think the cabal is moving so many of their assets and personnel to Antarctica? What are they so afraid of?
well, since they can't get off planet, they believe that under the ice there, deep underground, there'll be a modicum of safety from what some of them believe is going to be some sort of a kill shot incident from the sun.
Correct. How extensive is the Draco build out of Antarctica? Like how many buildings, how many cities, how many personnel do the Draco already have of their own people if you count the whole of Antarctica?
Well, I was recently given a reconnaissance flight of the area I just described of you and saw above the ground 2 cities under the ice. And it was lit up from the cities. The light reflected from the ice caverns. That was the only light that I saw. These were occupied by humans. And there were also below ground areas that went below ground. There were they were in very industrial looking cities. I did not see the reptilian bases. That's more on the largest area that where they occupy is in the southeast from the area that I'm talking about.
Okay. So this is a very interesting area, folks, because we now have this new insider, William Tompkins, and we're in the process of getting him out there too, and that's going to be happening in stages, which we'll talk about as time goes on. But William Tompkins independently debriefed hundreds and hundreds, in fact, over 1,000 different embedded Nazi spies that were actually working for the U.S. and confirmed that there were huge Draco cities under the ice in Antarctica. He doesn't know anything about Corey, and he is validating dozens and dozens of things that Corey's been telling me and that other insiders have told me. Something has changed. It's causing these Draco to want to flee our planet entirely.
Yes, there was recently an incident where 6 of the teardrop-shaped cruisers that we recently depicted on Cosmic Disclosure attempted to leave the atmosphere from Antarctica. And it was very surprising that swarms of unknown craft came from somewhere on the Earth, and they were shaped like
chevrons.
Yeah,
you said.
They were
like
called
triangular.
Yeah, they were basically triangles, but they were described as chevrons. And these craft were about the size of a fighter jet, and dozens and dozens of them appeared and attacked the 2 lead craft that were trying to leave the atmosphere, caused massive damage, and all 6 of them returned back and entered the ocean off the coast of Antarctica.
So this is a very significant development, and what it seems to show is that the war has gone red hot. Something is going on. And Corey, do you feel that if you have Dracos trying to flee the planet, some unexpected surprise attack of new-looking craft that nobody knows who made them or what they are?
Yes, they called them unknowns. It is believed that one of the factions of the Earth Alliance has obtained this technology. No one has taken responsibility for these attacks yet. So I have not been made privy to who they are. So apparently we don't know who they are.
But it appears to be the Earth Alliance.
It appears to be one of the factions of the Earth Alliance.
That has new toys that we didn't even know they'd have anything that good.
We did not know they had it. I was told that not only the Secret Space Program Alliance, but all of the groups right now are heavily concerned that with all of the space warfare that's going on, that some of this technology is going to land in a suburban area or a highly populated area. And they already have their cover stories ready. If you hear of a media blackout and a satellite crashed in an urban area with visible material in it, it's most likely not the case.
Underground bases are being blown up, and then it looks like 6.8 magnitude earthquakes, and you said they're changing in some cases, the earthquake measurements?
Yes, they changed their earthquake. They readjust the earthquake.
So that it's not as obvious that these are underground bases being wiped out.
Because there's the signature, it's the signature of there's a signature inside the quake itself that it shows like a weapons signature of these
Right.
exotic weapons.
So it appears then that there is some kind of war going on and that these Draco people really, really want to get out of here. Do you think that this is building up to, at some point, something that will become a lot more public, where the kind of stuff that we're talking about here will be like a historic event that will then be seen by many more people than what are sitting here right now?
Well, if the conflict above our heads gets much, I mean, I'm surprised that something hasn't happened already, like they're worried about. And what happened in Phoenix could very well be something. It could have been a ship that was damaged and tried to recover and exploded in the air.
Yeah, and there was that
Who
giant
knows?
red fireball recently. There was a giant green fireball recently. These giant meteors that light up the whole sky. Those are not meteors. So are there cleanup crews that then go and grab those wherever they land?
Yeah, I would imagine any non-terrestrial or anything that's classified that is going to hit the Earth, they're going to get a team there immediately.
So one of the questions I'm sure everybody wants to know, and we're just about out of time here, is when do you think we're going to see some real action? When do you think we might actually see a big change in our world that's visible and not just something we got to go to a conference to hear about?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I've expected to see something happen 3 or 4 times in the last year, with getting information in the background and then seeing things, happen a little bit. I expect something very overt to happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
Do you think part of what we're going to see is a really major exposure and defeat of the cabal, including their existing financial system?
It could start with a financial collapse, or it could start with an unintentional display of technology through
Right.
this conflict.
But the Alliance is doing its best to make sure that whatever goes on will be smooth and peaceful and not going to bomb us back into the Stone Age or something.
Correct.
Right.
And that it's presented to us in a responsible manner.
The beings that you've been in contact with, these blue avians, what would you say they really want us to know as a kind of a concluding thing for everybody here?
Well, in the programs, they refer to them more as, hippies,
Yeah.
because they're here talking about stuff that military people, just can't process. Being forgiving, being loving, that just does not compute to these guys. And when I tell them information from the Blue Avians, they look at me, like I have a daisy on my forehead.
And unfortunately for them, the blue avians are not talking to them directly. They're using you as their intermediary,
Right.
which has put both you and me and a few others in some very awkward positions.